Hello, everyone. So our next speaker is Scherer, and his talk is titled Ansible Beyond YAML. Please give him a warm welcome.
Okay, so good morning. First, because I'm a polite speaker, I will speak about myself. So my name is Michael. I'm living in Paris, and I'm currently working at Red Hat as a sysadmin for the OSAS team, which is open source and standard. So basically, I'm a traveling sysadmin. When there is a project which is strategic for the company who has infrastructure problems, they call me, like we need to upgrade this stuff, or we want to deploy this for 2 weeks, and when we say 2 weeks, we mean tomorrow. Can you do something? And usually, I can. And I've been able to do that mostly with Ansible, so that's why I decided to speak about it. Just quickly, does everybody know what is Ansible and everything? I hope so. Okay, so it will be quick. Just to make sure that everybody knows, because I know that some people will just not react. So Ansible is an orchestration tool written in Python. Basically, this is used by sysadmin, by developer to deploy and orchestrate any kind of task. So first, you need to have a list of systems, the system you want to modify. You connect there with SSH, using a SSH key, password, whatever, and then you apply a playbook, which is simply kind of a list of commands to execute. So it's like a shell script, but it's not. And each command it's used using modules. So for example, one module to install package, and that will make sure that you install only the package owns to start services, to create template file, and everything. So you want something special, it's likely already developed. So for example, there is a type of command that you will run, and I will use that as a skeleton to show you how we can extend everything. So it's all about extension possibility for Ansible. So the first part is, I said that the most common use is using playbook, but in practice you have other ways than playbook. So the first one is using ad hoc usage, which is something that I like a lot, because when I used to be working in another position, I didn't have access to remote execution and everything. So I decided, okay, you do not want to give me access, then I will take it. And I started to use Ansible like this. So that's how you can do without any kind of infrastructure, or we can upgrade Bash, because suddenly there is some big security issue. So that's the part that most people will already know, which is not that interesting except for slide filling. And there is a part about using everything in a Python script, which is quite nice, but basically there is only one thing to do, which is to import the module, use a single internal object runner, and give everything you want to do. So for example, I will be able to upgrade everything on all the server from example.org, and that's it. So if people expected to have more than this API, well, there is none. You can, it's quite nice because you can use Python instead of YAML or everything, but it's quite, it's not limited, but you cannot do much. That's what the tool is doing. Now what is interesting is how to extend for the other part. So in this case, I explained that you have a list of services, of a server. Oh, so it can be a list of, it's a file like this. So you can have a www.example.org, short.example.org, gerrit.example.org, which is quite special because you can specify what kind of port you want. For people that do not know Gerrit, it's trusting the port 22 for submitting patches. So when you are a sysadmin, you cannot use that, which is quite problematic, but the way it works. So for example, what you can do is a dynamic inventory. That's quite easy. You just create an executable script, and it can be anything. Of course, it will be Python, because you know you are a Python coder, but it can be Bash, it can be Erlang, it can be Go, it can be C. And the only thing it needs to do is to be able to return JSON, and you can use that to add metadata, because it's not only for NSA, it matters also for sysadmin, like the SSH port, the user, or the password. For example, of stuff that you can do. back in my previous position, I had to connect to a NetApp server, well, NetApp filer to be precise, using a 2 Bastion host and 1 password, because you know it's data, it's really well protected. So we had a GPG encrypted file, and I had a script that goes there, extracts the password, connect to the first one, to the second one, and everything. And using an Ansible dynamic inventory, I was able to just automate everything. You can list the server from Puppet if you are using Puppet and, like me, you didn't have access. Or LDAP, you can list the service from your favorite cloud provider, or even if it's not your favorite one. I mean, we do not care. And this kind of script usually either configured by environment, you know, like you are using your API key in the environment, and then it leaks on GitHub or Bugzilla because you are dumping all your variable in a bug report. Or you can use a configuration file, which is much better, because then you do not leak it. So there is a lot of examples. That's one way where you can extend and make sure that Ansible can be working with your dynamic infrastructure. Then the second interesting part is I said that you connect by SSH, but you can do more than SSH. I'm not speaking about connecting with a telnet or this kind of stuff. I mean, you can connect, for example, with a CH-root. So you can prepare some system with Ansible. As long as you are able to do that, you can use NSEnter to enter in Docker and container, because you know this is trendy, so I have to speak about Docker. You can use Funk, which is like Ansible, but it uses a client-server model, and it's done by the same people. So they were quite happy when I developed the Funk connector, so you can use Ansible on top of Funk. Technically, it should work with Salt. I have the code on my laptop, but technically it works. In practice, it does not work. I need to fix a bug. But that's the kind of stuff that you want. You can connect with jail, with anything, even on Windows with PowerShell. So for that, you just need to create a Python module. I'm using the path for the Git repository. You have to, it's an exercise for you to adapt for the package if you are using one. It's quite simple, it's just a Python module. You need to implement a connection class, the name matter. And then you have basically 5 methods with a closed method where no one does anything, because you know this is Python, everything is closed automatically. And technically, you can just create put file and fetch file using exec command, you know, remote executing cat and remote executing t, and that's it. So that's really quite fast. So if you are bored and if you have a good idea, just do it. They will be glad to accept everything. And so yeah, and that's for extension, but where you can go beyond YAML is directly in the YAML file. So I quickly spoke on playbook, expecting everybody to know, but so a playbook is basically something written in YAML. To be precise, that's a domain-specific language based on YAML, which is quite nice because you can use it to analyze with the script. So you can do all kind of interesting stuff with that. Except that since you cannot do everything in YAML, you know, it's just a declarative language, they still decided to add a Jinja, which is a well-known templating language from Python among 1,000 others. So for example, to show you what it looks like, there is one simple playbook that will install a shrubbery. So take note that the package, which is written in red, is a variable used for the line install package and also used for shell. So I just need to change a shrubbery by a Spanish Inquisition or bash to change the package installed. So since it's in Jinja, you can do whatever you want with it, like adding a Jinja extension. So for example, a Jinja filter, which is a simple Python function. You can add a Jinja function and tags. So again, that's I would refer you to the Jinja documentation about this. You enable that with a Jinja 2 extension. In the documentation, it's written that if you do not know what it does, do not touch it. And I do not know, so I do not touch it, I do not speak about it. But basically what you can do is this kind of stuff, creating specific tags, so you can delegate creation of a template file to other people, or to make sure that you have the right amount of abstraction, which is quite nice. So I said that this is a DSL. As such, it's declarative, but you still need from time to time to have, control structure. Like for example, this is a loop to install Apache and mod SSL. Precisely on this part, this is the loop. And which is nice is that the loop by themselves can be done with a plugin. So you have a plugin for loops called the Lookup plugin, and I will see why this is not called the loop plugin. So the documentation is still to be written. I mean, it's not a joke. It's written that in the documentation that they need to extend the documentation. So if you don't know what to do for the hacking session in 2 days, feel free. So this is implemented using a function lookup, which is reusable in Jinja. So for example, if we look at these two parts, the first one is looking at the home variable from our environment, and the second one is using the same code, but using the different notation, and it should result in the same output. Technically not the same, but good enough for my presentation. So if you want to add your own lookup for whatever you want, well, you can reuse it as a loop. So for example, the code is there. It's 5 lines of code and 4 lines of boilerplates and 20 lines of license. So you can extract specific data. So for example, you can extract password or create password on demand, which is quite nice because then you do not even need to communicate them. Sometimes you just need to have the same password at 2 parts of your configuration. And if it never leaves the server, it's better. No leak, no anything. And you can just remove it and change it every week. You can use it for interoperability with Saltmine or PuppetDB. If you are a big company, you already have a proper ETL support and everything, and a database, and even several custom reference database, because when something is authoritative, it's better to have multiple copies, because of course there is no risk of having different information in different databases. So again, it's quite easy. You just need to create a Python module. Most of the time, this is always starting by a Python module. Create a lookup module. And then you have a single method run with 2 parameters, and the self and the keyword arguments. And you just return the data. It's not documented, so I do not have much documentation, but you can check the code, for example. Again, there is a very simple one with 5 lines of interesting code, like the environment plugin, or one which is random choice, which is just 1 line, taking the entrance and giving a random one. And one way to extend Ansible is just to use your own Ansible module. So whatever you are doing in Shell, it's better to do it in Python. I do not need to convince you of that, but it's also easier because then you can have a proper return code and information and everything higher level. Like Python, it's battery included, so you have lots and lots of modules. There is basically 2 repositories, one named core, one named extra. So for people using Fedora since a long time, you will not be surprised this was done by ex-Red Hat people. An Ansible module is a Python script, obviously. The documentation goes in a variable called documentation, which is used on the website and some command line tool to show everything. It needs to have a function main, otherwise it do not work. And there is an object Ansible module that you need to instantiate with an argument specification, which represents the module signature. So you can say what is mandatory, what is not mandatory. You can have a complex system with incompatibility and dependency between parameters. If you want an example of that, there is a digital author module. I personally prefer to have separate modules, but unfortunately not everybody listens to me. So some people do very complex modules with this kind of parameter. And then you communicate with Ansible using a module failed JSON or module exit JSON. Fail when you fail, and exit when you do not fail. So that's quite obvious. But there is something you need to take care of, which is that the code needs to be compatible with Python 2.4. So if Alex Gaynor is in the room. Well, it's for the same reason. It's because some Ansible customers are using Rails 5. I do not think they are checking that quite. They do not check that much, but if you want to go in core, I think they do check. So if it's for your module, it's fine. I mean, you can support what you want. But if you want to be included in Ansible, it needs to be Python and supporting Python 2.4, or you can wait until they decide to stop having customer for Rails 5, maybe in 10 years. So, sorry. The module is executed remotely, so you need to make sure that it's sent to a system that has Python. You need to make sure that the dependency list is down, so you do not need to start to need something like async.io, twisted, or NumPy, or everything. You, if possible, use standard stuff. And there is one single hack that needs to be taken care of, that you need to have this line, because this line is, there is a search and replace for the whole code of the module, so it can be run using one single file. So you need to have this. If you change anything, like add one more space or just remove the star or whatever, it will not work, it will complain. Then if you want to test the module, well, there is one script, which is called the test module. And unlike the plugin, there is documentation and everything. It was not the case when I did the first presentation, but I need to show that they are listening to me and doing the proper documentation and everything. So since this is a script, well, you can use regular scripting test. There is a lot of session today about this, so just go there. And sometimes you cannot do real-life testing, like if you need to create 1,000 VM, or maybe it's quite expensive. And this is an unsolved problem for now. I do not think they are using mock testing. They are just using a separate test run every month or something like this. And yes, sometimes what if you want to go beyond, like I do not want to execute something remotely, I want to execute on my laptop. And that's a good question, and thanks for asking it, because there is Action plugin. Action plugin are module partially executed client-side. So for example, when you want to copy something, well, you need to execute it from the system just to open the file, or if you want to do some templating, it's again done on the client side. So again, this is a Python module. Again, you have a specific class to implement. And again, you have a function called run. And you need to return the result of the module execution. As I said, this is executed client side. It's not that used, because everything interesting has been already done. But if you have an ID, you can do it. The only problem is you need to know about the Ansible internals. There is like 10 parameters, and it's documented in the code, but there is not much an API for that. And I do not think it's stable yet, but you can go ask them. They have a booth in the expo hall. So yeah, basically we covered almost everything you can do, except what happens once you finish the run. And for that, we have a Callback plugin. So basically, this is a plugin which is called during execution. With it, you can do what you want. For example, log something in a file. You can send everything in a database. Or you can just annoy your coworker by posting on IRC, or whatever you are using, Slack, HipChat, testing, sending SMS, whatever. Again, Python module. Again, there is a class. And again, you need to overload some specific method. So for example, you have a method playbook on start, and you have a method runner on OK. It's quite self-documented, and there is one empty file that you can just copy and paste, and you can do what you want. This example is a warning on IRC that a server is still working, which is not that useful. And so I went faster than I expected, which means that I will have time for questions. But left as exercise if you want. There is a few other stuff that you can extend. Since I think version 1.8, if I'm not wrong, you can have a local cache of the fact. Each time you connect to a server, it gets it gathers lots of facts, like what type of version it is, since how long is it running, IP address and everything. Now we can store that on a file or in, I think, in a Redis database. And there is so much stuff where you can put data. So you can put it in etcd. You just need to write a module. Not for this one, because I already did, but you can store that in Consul, in Cassandra or Elasticsearch. You just need to write a module for that. There is a shell plugin, which is something I didn't look at. It's mostly used to be able to make Ansible run on CSH and on Windows. So it's not exactly stuff that I use. I didn't look, so it's left as exercise. And there is a plugin for variable, so you can decide to inject variable using more than just YAML file. Well, I do not really have any use for that, but if you do, it's quite easy. So there is this kind of plugin. And there is soon a new version of Ansible coming. So there is an older version, which is currently the 1.9, and they want to refactor everything. And there is Engine V2. So people who went to the Ansible Fest in London, there was one whole presentation for that. And for people who cannot go there because it was in the past, well, there is video and slide, and there is a James Camaretta somewhere in the building, so you can just ask to him. So they plan to add execution strategy plugin. So you decide if you run everything at once or start with the web server or everything. And there is potential change on interface. I say potential because for now they do not have plan, but as they are gonna refactor everything, maybe some stuff that I said will be internal, will be changed. And since this is not documented, maybe we will have bad surprise, but there are things I do not want to break too much. So if you are already working on that, go discuss with them. And if you have any question, I think it's the right moment. And if you don't have, you can just make some applause for me for 5 minutes. It's good for my ego.
So we have a few minutes for questions. If you've got one, there's a microphone right there.
Yeah, I've actually got one. I am currently transferring to using Ansible for some of my stuff at work, and I'm finding that I have a really difficult time if I have just 2 little shell scripts that I can set in Ansible, but a list of variables. There isn't an easy way to just wrap 2 scripts. It seems like the for loop depends upon a specific module. Is there a way of using the same variables without having to replay them on 2 modules in a row?
I think that you can use, well, there is several ways. It's a shell script, and you want to, if I understand correctly, you want to send them and reuse variable, and for the same. That's a good question. I will either do something like send some template file and write them as an environment variable, or I will just rewrite everything as Python, and then I can use them as an Ansible variable.
Yeah, that's what I did. Okay.
I don't think there is other way. If you want to communicate with them, you can use. No, I don't think there is other way.
Thanks.
A question? Even unrelated to Ansible, I mean, I cannot answer anything, but at least I can try. Okay.
Yeah, I'm using Ansible too, and I'm loving of test-driven development. Is there any way to test-driven playbook?
To what?
I want to test playbook. is there any way to the test making playbook with test-driven development?
There is several ways. Either you are using tags and you say when the test tag is activated, you do not go with this stuff like creating a VM or destroying a VM, and you just do that. Or you can just change what I do is I run everything in Travis, and I make sure that I only use non-destructive change, because I prefer to make sure that my automation do not destroy everything. I mean, I've seen Terminator, and it never ends well. And what you can do is just decide to use a different inventory set of server. So where for your test, you will run on a specific OpenStack Cloud or Workspace or whatever, and you do not touch production. And I don't think there is more than this. I do have a Travis YAML file which is testing everything, but it assumes that you run that as root. So you can do that in Docker, you can do that in a VM or Vagrant or this kind of stuff. But besides that, no, there is no specific magic involved for testing. You just need to give a test VM and does it. There is people looking at a server spec. I'm quite hesitant to use it because it's Ruby. And I do not want to have Ruby and Python for people using my Ansible playbook. But no.
Thanks.
Okay, so thanks for listening.